Well, hey, good morning, everybody. Welcome to day 2 of Stand Up for Grain Safety Week. This is a week focused on everybody's safety, safety around grain, safety around grain structures. And our focus today is about safety culture. So I'm Barb Grove. I'm your moderator today, and I work for Central Valley Ag as their quality systems manager. I'm a member of the Jeeps organization and an original founder of the Stand Up for Grain Safety Week. To say that the grain industry, the ag industry, and safety is a passion for me. So this is very exciting to see everybody joining us today. So a few little statistics when it comes to safety. 6,300 people die daily due to work-related accidents or diseases, and this is worldwide. So that's daily, 6,300 people. 4% of the global gross domestic product, our GDP, is the economic burden of poor occupational safety and health practices. 96 workers died every 96 minutes from a world work-related injury in the US in 2022. $167 billion is the total cost of US work-related injuries in the 2021 per the National Safety Council. So think of those statistics about how many people die. The least of all is the cost. It's about people. So we want to bring you some things today to help you with your culture at work. What to expect today. So we want to make sure that we're being interactive. We will pop up some polls. You'll hear a great presenter. There'll be some quizzes. We'll throw a few little chat storms in the box over there. So make sure to tell us who you are and where you were from. We love to see where everybody is, where we're reaching. In the past, we've hit not just the United States, but many countries. That's very important because we all have workers and we want to make sure that we're keeping them safe. If you have any technical issues today, please email grainsafety2010@gmail.com, and that will pop up there in the chat box for you. So these learning sessions today are brought to you by Jeeps, the Grain Elevator and Processing Society, and GHSC, the Grain Handling Safety Council, as well as today is sponsored by Central Valley Ag. So we have the generous support of a whole lot of sponsors. So if you haven't registered for the rest of this week's events, there's still time to do so. So use that link in the chat box at www.standupforgrainsafety.org. So as this week is dedicated to safety, we want to remind everybody of their rights. Everybody has the right to a safe workplace. And everybody has the right to be able to report unsafe situations that they are in. So just remember, you're not alone in this, that you have the right to be protected. So this learning session, again, would not be possible without the generous support of our sponsors and partners. The partners that have helped us out this year are Bartlett Grain Company, Central States Center for Agriculture Safety and Health, Central Valley Ag, the Grain Elevator and Processing Society, Jeeps, Grain and Feed Association of Illinois, the Grain Journal, Kansas State University, Lamar Advertising Company, National Grain and Feed Association, as well as the National Grain and Feed Foundation, the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, and the University of Nebraska Medical Center. So let's show our appreciation by, hey, let's put a little clap for those sponsors and those partners that make these things happen. Let's get out there in the emojis in the chat box and hey, show us how you can do all that. So a link will be posted in the chat box later in the event, near the end of the event, and this link will help you to receive attendance for today. We also want you to recognize your stand-up participation and receive a certificate from the stand-up event as well. And that is on standupforgrainsafety.org, and recognize your participation. You know, events like today, we want to make sure to give something to people that they can join in and be a part of. We have resources out on our website, the standupforgrainsafety.org, that people can use for toolbox talks. There's videos, lots of great things that people can use if you don't have your own resources. But we also really want to make sure that people are doing these things at their own facilities. So if you hold an event this week, hey, make sure to tell us about it. There is a recognize your participation, also a place you can post and put that your event is out there, even if it's a private event. It's great to see across the country what people have going on. So again, watch that chat box. Make sure to put any questions you might have for our speaker later on out there in the chat box. So after his presentation, we can make sure to ask that expert on things that have worked for him and things that haven't worked for him. At the end of the day session, when you exit Zoom, there should be a short survey to pop up. Let us know. Let us know your thoughts on the session, and also, hey, what are some more ideas for us? So we have support people standing by to clarify any regulatory questions today. You know, each state is a little bit different. Some people are on a national plan when it comes to OSHA. Some people are on a state plan. So we want to make sure that there's no confusion. So our behind the scenes experts are there to help answer those questions if they see something that needs clarified. Make sure you get credit, or to make sure we know how many people are out there. Sometimes, you know, we know that these sessions are done in a conference room and you have multiple people joining you. So we're going to launch a quick poll, and you can tell us how many people are watching with you right now, just to get you going. So why our background support pops up that poll, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our speaker today. All right, there it is. There's that poll. So I'd like to introduce you to Brad Bousquet. Brad is the VP of Safety and Compliance for Central Valley Ag Cooperative. He leads CVA's safety department in guiding CVA's 100+ facilities in the implementation of their safety programs and working to build a strong safety culture, both within the organization and within the communities they serve. With over 26 years experience, including both successes and failures, Brad has learned a thing or two about what it takes to build a safety culture. That is more than the flavor of the week. So welcome, Brad.
Hey, good morning. Thanks, Barb.
Yes.
Yeah, so a little bit about me. I went to the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. I graduated there in 1995 with a degree in criminal justice, and I pursued a career with the Nebraska State Patrol. I worked with them for about 9 years in the Carrier Enforcement Division, and then I took on the role of Safety Director for Central Valley Ag in 2005. So today I'm going to share my journey in learning my role as a safety leader. Throughout this presentation, I hope you all find yourselves asking the same question I continue to ask myself every day, and that question is, are you doing enough? Are you doing enough to shape the safety culture within your organization? And you don't have to be a safety director to do that. There's leaders at all levels of an organization, and everybody has a part in making that happen. So I'm going to go ahead and share screen here, Barb, if I can figure this out.
Perfect.
All right, you got my screen up there?
Um, just a minute. I'll say my screen froze up here, Brad. Yes. Yes, I see your screen. Thank you very much.
All right. Well, very good. My presentation is called Stacking the Deck for Safety. I use this presentation in our company to provide leadership training for our supervisors and leaders within our organization. It's kind of a simplified way of explaining how to develop safety culture. Now, I'm learning every day, just like all of the rest of you are, in developing safety culture. And I'll tell you, very little from my previous job translated over to building safety culture. I'm going to get started by talking about a day that really helped me understand my role as a safety professional. It was September 22nd, 2019. I was at home with my family, getting ready to cook a Sunday dinner, and the phone rang. And on the other end of the line was a fire chief from a neighboring town. He said, "Hey Brad, I understand Central Valley Ag has high angle rescue teams and you're part of those teams." I said, "Yes, sir." He said, we have a situation our fire department's dealing with, and we could sure use your technical assistance in handling the situation. Would you be able to put your team together and come help us?" I said, "Absolutely." So I put our high angle rescue team together and we proceeded to the neighboring town. And when we showed up, this was the facility that we were looking at. Now, this is not a Central Valley Ag facility. This was a competitor in the area. But when the fire department calls for assistance, obviously we're going to help. And so we did everything we could to help that day. Showed up, unloaded my trailer, and talked to one of the firefighters on site. I said, "What's the situation here? What are we dealing with?" He told me that there was an individual who went into one of those silos in the side door of those silos to try to bust free some grain. He went in there only with a piece of PVC pipe and himself to try to free up grain towards the bottom of that silo. They said workers hadn't heard from him for a while, so they went to check on him, and when they did not see him inside the silo. The firefighter told me, "We've got a rescuer tripod on top, and we've got a rescuer lowered down inside the silo, walking the grain trying to find the individual, but they can't find him. They can't find where he even sunk through." And they said, "I guess we'll kind of lean on you guys to help us through this." So we put our tripod up top as well, and that's where the day began for us. We lowered one of our team members down inside the silo, so now there's one of the fire department's rescuer and one of our team members down inside the silo, both of them on lifelines. They're down inside the silo searching and trying to dig through this grain. The grain was crusted and rotten inside the silo. It was very difficult to try to bust through. They couldn't tell where the guy was, but they had some ideas. Eventually, they realized that it was kind of a futile attempt to try to dig inside the silo, that we needed bigger equipment. So we brought in a grain vac from one of our facilities. We were able to get the grain vac hose through the side door and start vacuuming grain out of that silo to see if we can locate where that individual was. Now, this whole time, my job, I'm the team leader. I'm standing at the tripod at the top of that elevator. My job is to make sure that the lift crew and the high angle rescue team has eyes inside the bin. I'm watching inside the bin. I'm listening to the radio and controlling the situation from there. We worked for many, many hours. Daylight turned to dusk. We're working under lights, and my job is still to be at that hole and looking in that hole. Now it's dark. I've got my flashlight. I'm shining down into that hole, and you can imagine how dark it was inside that silo at that point. With my flashlight, I could not see the bottom of the bin. In fact, my flashlight barely shined maybe 10 feet into that silo. So all I saw was my lifeline, and I was listening on the radio to make sure that we had tension on the ropes and and our rescuers were in safe condition at all time. Eventually, the rescuers gave us a command from inside the silo. They said, all right, we're ready to haul on main. Now, when you get a command of haul on main, that means that there's something at the end of your lifeline. Now, for me, it was kind of a surreal moment because I knew that this was not a rescue. This was definitely a recovery. And I knew at the minute we got that command what we were dealing with. We had a body on the end of that lifeline, and it was our team's job to raise that body the entire height of that silo and remove that body from that silo. So as I started giving the commands for the rescue team to raise, it was kind of a slow process. We could maybe get about a 20-foot lift, and then we'd have to reposition our lifelines, get another bite on it, and continue that process. The whole time I've got my flashlight shining inside that silo, and all I can see is a rope. The rope had a little bit of swing in it, but I could only see the rope. Eventually, the rope got high enough that I saw something at the end of my light that will stick with me for the rest of my career. I saw a lifeless body that was slung on the end of that rope being raised inside that silo. We got that individual out of that silo and up on the roof deck. I watched as the firefighters put the body in a body bag and move the body down the man lift shaft and take the body away. So that was a pretty heavy moment for me at that particular moment. It was kind of surreal throughout the rescue. I wasn't really thinking about it, but when I saw the victim, when I saw the individual, and I'll give him a name. His name is Zane Fecht, 32 years old. When I saw that young man come out of that silo, I was hit with a lot of emotion. I was very upset about the situation. I was upset about the senseless nature of how it happened. Very sad about the situation. Concerned about my team and what they had saw that night, and there was just a lot going on. And I asked myself a lot of questions. Why did this happen? Why did that individual go inside that silo in the first place with that rotten grain to try to bust up that shelf grain? Where was his lifeline, and why did he not have on a harness? Where was the observer that was supposed to be at the door? Where was the Ben entry permit that was supposed to be filled out? Where were his supervisors that should have been overseeing this process and making sure that it was done safely? I had so many questions. I went home that night. I took a shower. I laid in bed, kissed my wife goodnight. I laid down on my pillow and I closed my eyes, and what do you suppose I saw all night long? I saw the beam of my flashlight shining into that silo, and I saw what was at the end of that beam. And it stuck with me all night long. And a question came up that gnawed on me throughout the night. And that question was, are you doing enough? See, Central Valley Ag, we've got 100 locations across 3 states. We have grain facilities in most of those locations. Am I doing enough to make sure something like this never happens at Central Valley Ag? That was the question that I asked myself all night long. One thing that I've learned throughout my career with Central Valley Ag is that safety does not build itself. It's not something that just exists. You can't put a sign up that says safety first and all of a sudden you magically have a safety culture and people are doing safe work. It doesn't work that way. It takes leaders dedicated to making it happen. Our industry, we've got a checkered past. We've had tragedy over and over again. Let's talk about the culture of the co-op and what I walked into when I became a safety director. So this is, again, you're kind of getting my perspective coming in as a law enforcement officer, and now magically you're a safety director and it's your job to change the culture. What did I walk in on? Now I'm going to go back quite a ways here and talk about where the co-op began. The co-op began as individual little facilities like this that were a group of producers that came together to buy and share resources. Those facilities grew. They were peppered all across the state, across the Midwest. Now, our co-op began, or at least part of it began, in the little town that I live in Oakland, Nebraska, as a single facility. Eventually, that single facility merged with its neighboring co-ops. Now, at this time, safety is pretty loose within this organization. This was throughout the 80s. And why was it? It was because the safety director was also the HR guy, who was also the finance guy, who was also the sales guy. And there was no designated safety person for most of these facilities. It was just another hat that the individual wore. At the same time, these companies were merging. Neighboring co-ops were doing the same thing, growing and growing. Each of these facilities brought with it its own culture, its own way of doing things. In the early 2000s, we saw bigger mergers, and then them companies came together. And then eventually, those companies came together. So that's kind of the growth in a nutshell of Central Valley Ag over the years. It's expanded even since this picture. When did I start? I started in 2005. I started in 2005 after the merger of 3 large co-ops. We had approximately 40 locations across northeast Nebraska at the time. When I started, we had an extremely high injury rate, and I will tell you, the hazards were unmitigated almost everywhere throughout our facility. I remember my first day of work, my boss took me into a room and said, over here's our safety program. It was a large binder sitting on a shelf. I said, really? That's our safety program? The funny thing is it was a beautiful binder. Everything was in there. But you can tell nobody had ever looked through that binder. It looked brand new. It was sitting on that bookshelf. The reality was that was the best that they could do because they were wearing so many hats at the time. They had put together a written program to try to implement something in the name of safety. The problem with that program is it sat on the bookshelf and never got used. It was a bookshelf safety program. It was there really to implement safety in a matter of checking the box. What did it not do? It did not improve safety knowledge amongst the employee group. It did not improve the work environment for the employees. It did not change any of the procedures or the way they did their work, and it did not instill ownership and safety. It was a bookshelf safety program. So I decided I can do better than this. And so I put together kind of a schematic of how I thought I would make safety work, or how I could help drive a safety culture within the organization. And so I thought, well, this is pretty logical. I'll start by identifying the hazards, and I'll just follow through the logical steps. The next step would be create safety programs around those hazards and purchase the necessary safety equipment, do training, do accident investigations, observations, and inspections, and then follow up and continue that circle if I needed to address other hazards or to see if I properly addressed the hazards. To me, this was logical. This just seemed like this would work. It was a complete disaster. I failed. This is not how you drive safety culture in an organization. I'll tell you the day that the light turned on for me as a safety professional. I was new to the job. I had built all the safety programs. I had purchased all of the safety equipment. I had the lifelines, the harnesses, the gas meters, you name it. I had the nice PowerPoint presentation put together. I had the bin entry permits and the binder, everything that you need to be safe inside a grain facility. I set up and I did a presentation for one of our facilities. I had all the employees gather around. I showed the PowerPoint. The whole time I was showing the PowerPoint, I noticed that the manager, kind of a crusty old manager, was standing with his arms crossed in the back of the room. Kind of wondered what was going on there, but at the end of the presentation, I said, "Are there any questions?" And the manager said, "Well, you can take all of that stuff and put it in the back room. We don't need it." That was the moment that the light turned on for me. That's when I realized it's not as easy as I thought it was going to be. Yes, we've got to have the safety systems, the processes in place. We have to have the training, we have to have the equipment, we have to have the procedures, the books, the rules, all of that. But equally as important to the safety processes is making sure that we have safety leadership behaviors. We have the buy-in, we have the culture. You can't have success without both. And that's where I developed kind of this as a way to illustrate what it takes to build that safety culture. What does it take to make sure that you're doing enough to make sure your employees go home at night? I call it stacking the deck for safety. So when an employee comes to work every day, their job is to get work done. And so using the deck to illustrate this, I have employees pull a card off the top of the deck. That represents the work that they had to do that day to get the work done, drawing a card from the deck. I tell them the only stipulation is that if you draw a king, a queen, a jack, or a joker, that means that you were fatally injured that day and did not go home for work. Now those face cards are evenly scattered throughout that deck. Now who in their right mind would draw a card off the top of the deck if they knew that they could potentially draw a face card that would kill them? That's what stacking the deck's all about. Safety leadership's role is to make sure that we stack the deck in favor of employees going home at night. We have to first remove the face cards before they start drawing cards from the deck. So let's talk about what those face cards represent. The first card represents knowledge, the king. Zane Fecht, 32, lost his life inside a grain silo. Did he know the hazards that he was facing that night? Had anybody showed him how he could be killed inside that silo, walking on grain, trying to stand on top of it, trying to bust it up with a PVC pole? No, he didn't know. Nobody had ever showed him. Nobody had ever talked to him about it. Because certainly he wouldn't have taken the risks had he properly been educated on the hazards or been shown the right way to do that job. Knowledge is everything. We got to make sure that we train our employees. They need to know the hazards. They need to know the safety processes. And this is probably one of the most critical ones. They need to know why it matters to me. Why is this a rule that we need to follow? And it's got to be more than just consequences. The ideal situation is when people choose to correct behaviors and comply with the rules because they believe it's the right thing to do. They recognize the more painful potential consequences which could occur to themselves and others is if they choose the unsafe option. We've got to convince them. We've got to influence their behaviors. That's not easy to do. So number one, knowledge. Make sure that employees know how to be safe. Once we've done the right training, we've done the right education for our employees, we can remove the kings from the deck. But at that point, it's not safe to draw from the deck because we still have 3 other face cards. The next is the queen. The queen represents a quality workplace, safe facilities, safe equipment. Certainly, Zane entered an unsafe workplace that day. That grain silo should have never had out of condition grain that was so crusted that we had to bust through it with chisels darn near to get it to go through the grain bag. That silo was in terrible shape. Did he have the right equipment? He wasn't wearing a harness. He didn't have a lifeline. For goodness sakes, those are the bare minimum, right? So the quality workplace was not there. So Zane suffered from the potential exposure to pulling a king, not having the right knowledge, and to pulling the queen, not having a safe workplace or a quality workplace. So let's just say that you do everything that you can to remove the queen. You do all of your facility inspections, you purchase the right equipment, you make sure that your facilities are safe, your grain is in good condition. Is that enough? It's not enough. There's still face cards in the deck. Another face card that we have to remove is the jack. And I may have a little bit of a stretch on this, but let's avoid jacked up procedures in the work that we do at our facilities. So the jack represents procedures. We have bin entry permits for a reason. The bin entry permits is our safety checklist to make sure that we don't skip important steps. Lockout tagout is another example. Confined space entry permits are other examples. Developing the right procedures and following those procedures saves lives. So very important that we have the right procedures in place and employees know how to use them. So let's just say that we've got the right training in place, we've removed the kings, we've got a quality work environment, we've removed the queens, and we've got the right procedures in place and the right SOPs, so we removed the jacks. We still have 2 cards inside the deck, and those cards are the jokers. And the jokers represent the commitment piece. You can have the other 3, but if you don't remove the jokers, you're never going to get to a culture that's going to save lives, and you're not doing enough. That's the difficult one, though. That's the buy-in, the engagement, the safety culture, the behaviors. You know, the 3 cards that are really easy to remove, those are the kings, queens, and jacks. I can do training. I can make sure through audits that my facilities are safe, buy the right equipment. I can implement the right procedures and protocols. There's a pretty straightforward path to removing those face cards, but there is no straightforward path to removing the jokers. It's extremely difficult, and the culture is different from one location to the other. The culture piece is the invisible part of safety. It's the core values and shared attitudes. But if there's one card that's going to sink the ship or cause somebody to be killed at work, I will tell you it's most likely the joker. So we've got to figure out a way to remove the jokers from the deck. Now you all may have some methods of your own, and this is just 3 of them that I came up with that I've had some success with. And so I'll share my way of removing the jokers from the deck. Number 1, make safety personal. It's got to be more than just rules. Yes, rules are important. They create boundaries for us. They create accountability. But people have got to be safe at work because they believe it's the right thing to do. Because how often do our employees go out into the workplace and work by themselves when no one else is watching? Rules only work when people know that there's consequences or they're likely to be caught. The higher level of safety is when people believe it's the right thing to do and do it because it's in their heart. We've got to make safety personal. The 6 most dangerous words that were ever combined are these 6 words. It will never happen to me. It'll never happen to me. You've all had workers working at your facilities that say these things or believe these things. They can take the risk. They're invincible. An important part of removing the jokers from the deck is figuring out a way to dispel that belief that it will never happen to me. I think a very, very important way to make safety personal is through stories. What you're looking at here is a cross outside of one of our grain bins. This is in Tamora, Nebraska. 20 years ago, November 4th, 2003, Troy Childers lost his life inside that silo. He lost his life inside that bin because shortcuts were being taken, and he was buried in grain. This is one of our facilities. Now, this was before we had merged with this group of elevators, so I wasn't there when it happened, but I will tell you today, every time I drive to that facility and see that cross, I stop and pause, and it makes me reflect. One of the things that I do with our employee group to help make safety real, to make it personal, is I share stories, and I share stories a lot. I've created something called safety news alerts where if it's in the news, I grab the article, I share the article in a one-page document across the entire company. Over the years, I've accumulated probably over 100 of these that I've shared with our employee group, many of them dealing with grain bin tragedies. I've created a video of some of these that I've shared with our employee group. I'm going to share that video now with you. That video goes on for quite a while longer, and I've only shared just a small portion of the stories that I've shared with our employee group. When I first started sharing these with the employee group, the comments were, wow, why does this keep happening? How come it happens so often? The employees were just dumbfounded by the amount or the frequency of these types of accidents. In their mind, this was just something that never happened. Sharing these safety news alerts made it real, and it made it real to them. So step number one, make safety personal, make them dispel the myth that it'll never happen to me, make them believe that it's real and it could happen to them. So step number one, make safety personal. The next step to removing the jokers is to develop safety leadership within your organization. Managers can make or break a safety culture. Developing safety leadership must be part of your organization's game plan. There is no textbook for how to be a safety leader. We've got to provide some of that coaching for those managers or leaders. So what happens if we have a manager that walks past unsafe acts and doesn't acknowledge them or take the right action when that happens? What about that manager that sits their employee down at a binder and said, hey, here's our safety programs, read this and then sign the training roster, but doesn't really give it any real heart or meaning? That's a manager that's 1 foot in and 1 foot out. They're not opposed to your safety rules, but they're really not doing the right work to make the safety culture happen. Now, if you got an individual leading safety that's 1 foot in and 1 foot out, where do you suppose the employee group is? Exactly. 1 foot in, 1 foot out. Now, what happens when we have leadership that has 1 foot in and 1 foot out? We're leaving cards in the deck, aren't we? We're leaving kings in the deck. The employees are not gaining the right knowledge. We're leaving queens in the deck. We don't have the safe work environment that we could possibly have. We're leaving jacks in the deck. Our programs are not being properly implemented. We're leaving the jokers in the deck. People don't buy into safety because it's just a rule they have to follow and it doesn't mean anything. We have to do better than that. We have to coach our supervisors to be champions for safety, to be standing in the middle. If we've got champions for safety leading safety, the employee group is going to follow, and then we will have success in our safety cultures. But that takes a lot of work, and it's not natural to stand in the middle of that circle. It's easy to have 1 foot in and 1 foot out. It's hard to stand every day in the center of that circle and drive safety the way we're supposed to. In my position as a safety director, I see my job as being a coach to helping those managers and those other people in the organization who are leading safety to be better at it. Just like any other coach, what does a coach need to do? Define what the expectations are. What does right look like? Set goals, measure progress, provide benchmarking, continuous coaching and feedback, and show encouragement. That's how we help build leadership within our organizations. One of the things that we do at Central Valley Ag is we have a program called All In Safety. Essentially, that's a system of audits and coaching where we work with our supervisors and help them get better. What are we helping them get better at? Developing employee knowledge, ensuring facility safety, program implementation, and safety engagement. And when we have wins, we celebrate those wins. I will tell you that this has been an instrumental tool for us in helping drive results in developing a safety culture that works. Some people measure success in safety by how many accidents they have. I don't think that's the right way to do it. I think the right way to do it is to measure whether or not there's face cards left in the deck and how well you're doing removing the face cards. Each location, each supervisor through this process receives a report card, and we give them a grade in those 4 areas. And then we provide benchmarking so they know how they rank amongst all of the rest of the managers throughout the company. And we use those audits as a way to help benchmark and improve the type of coaching we give that manager to help them get better. Number 2 was to build safety leadership within your organization. Number 3, employee ownership. Empower employees to stop unsafe work. Encourage near miss and unsafe reporting. Set group goals and celebrate successes. Hold meaningful safety committee meetings. Have employees lead safety training. Listen to your employees when they're coming to you with concerns or problems that they would like addressed. Have them be part of the solution. Employees need to own safety at a higher level than they do in most organizations. There's pride in ownership. One of our all-in processes is to reward those locations who achieve high levels on their scores. And I will tell you, throughout our organization, there is a lot of pride in being one of those top achieving locations. I'm going to show a video here real quickly about our high angle rescue teams. Our high angle rescue teams, they were developed early on because we saw that the local community fire departments maybe didn't have the right training or resources to do bin entry or rescue. So we decided to develop our own technical rescue teams and use those internally. We have 5 teams across our trade territory. So I'm going to share this video, and then I'll kind of give you the Paul Harvey, the rest of the story after the video plays. I'll talk about kind of one of the side effects of putting these teams together. So here's the video about our high angle rescue teams.
Central Valley Ag started the rope rescue teams because we saw a significant need. A lot of the rural fire departments in the area don't have that expertise, nor do they have the training or the equipment. So we thought we would take that upon ourselves to provide that for them and be that resource that they need.
Farming is getting bigger, faster. Bin capacities, combine capacities are so big. We're dealing with elevations that are 200, 220 foot tall. And all it takes is the slip of a footing or slip of a wrench, and you have a situation.
So within CVA, we've got 5 rope rescue teams, and we've strategically placed them across our footprint. Our footprint goes from Iowa down to Kansas.
It's like a brotherhood. It's a group of guys that are very committed to a level of safety for our customers and for our employees. The group of guys that are on there show a lot of passion, and to be part of that, it's exhilarating.
It is so awesome to watch a team gel together, and the adrenaline is flowing and everything like that. Watching that team grow and knowing what their strengths are and what their weaknesses and what they need to work on.
Kind of one leg at a time, just kind of throw your hips against where your knees are at, okay?
The danger involved is significant. We're hanging from 120, 130 feet of rope. So the safety that's involved in being able to do that rescue safely is imperative.
Hold on, mate.
Being able to think outside of the box is the best way of thinking when going into a scenario. And then obviously we have our processes and we have our methods in place that are going to make sure that we take care of that rescue safely.
To know that you've got 2 lives in the palm of your hand hanging at the end of a rope that you're controlling. You want to make sure that you've got their back.
Within our community, that we'll do a practice or we'll start training or whatever, and you will actually have some people that will be a spectator, and it's really kind of neat to know they'll come up to you and really be surprised and happy that they actually have a security blanket. They know that they're in trouble, that CVA would be there to support our local fire departments.
Fire departments have fire training, interior attack training. There's a lot of different angles, and it takes a lot of different people to be able to do a little bit of everything. CVA being able to add the rope rescue side, it just adds to the community and adds what we can donate and what we can give to those communities and those environments and those safety hazards.
Rescue is ready. Main, prepare to lower.
Every community has had a bin entrapment. Every community has had a life lost. And if this rope rescue team from CVA can help educate farmers today, help educate fire departments, help educate the communities, it was an accomplishment.
I didn't show that as an advertisement for Central Valley Ag, although I'm pretty proud of our rope rescue teams. I shared that because I have a story tied to that. Early on, when I took over the role of safety director, I got all of our location managers at our grain facilities together, sat them down in a large conference room, and we had a meeting. I said, hey, here's the situation. What we're doing today is not right. We can't have people inside grain bins with augers running. We can't have people inside grain bins with sweep augers running. We've got to use lockout tagout. We've got to cover our sump holes with grates. There's a lot of things that we're doing wrong today that we can't continue doing. People are going to get hurt. Here's what OSHA expects of us. Here's the rules we got to follow. I went through those guidelines with them. At the end of the meeting, as everybody was departing the room going to lunch, I was just a few steps behind them, and I don't know that they knew that I was there or that I was within earshot, but I heard some of the chitter chatter amongst them. And the conversations went something like this. We will never be able to empty another grain bin again. It's going to take too long. We'll have to hire another 500 people just to empty grain bins or clean out grain bins. This is ridiculous. This guy doesn't know what he's talking about. Now here's the Paul Harvey to that Hyengo rescue team video. Some of those same people early on in my career that were making those comments at that meeting were the people who were involved in making this video. Having employees take ownership of safety and become part of those rope rescue teams has elevated their ownership of safety to a higher level, a much higher level. When we put these rope rescue teams together, I never anticipated that it would be anything more than just a rescue resource. These guys started going, after they took their training and they were involved in a couple rescues where they actually saved lives, they made it their mission to go out and have meetings with farmers and educate farmers. That's safety at a much higher level. That's the third way to remove the jokers from the deck. Have employees involved in safety. Kind of a neat deal that we've seen here in the past couple of years. Some of our employee group have built little models of grain engulfment simulators and augers, and they take them to all of the local schools. I think some of our employee group, they've been to dozens of schools in their area, providing training, and with FFA groups and with farm groups. That's owning safety at a much higher level. So let's recap a little bit. We need to remove the king, do the right training to get the knowledge there. We've got to remove the queen, make sure we have a quality work environment, have the right equipment, safe facilities. We got to remove the jacks, make sure that we've got the proper procedures and protocols and SOPs in place. And very importantly, we've got to remove the jokers. And the jokers is the commitment, the buy-in piece. 3 methods to removing the jokers. Number 1, make safety personal. Number 2, develop safety leadership within your organization. And number 3, employee involvement in safety. Employees need to own safety. Hey, at the end of the day, our job is to remove those face cards. If we remove those face cards from the deck, there is no reason for our employees to have to draw one of those face cards when they come to work, because we've got the face cards in our pocket. Safety is simply a game of odds. Stacking the deck in favor greatly improves the odds of your employees going home safe at the end of the day. That's the end of my presentation. I appreciate Barb, you inviting me to give this presentation. At this point, I take any questions.
Okay, just a minute here, Brad, if you would go ahead and stop share. Thank you, perfect. All right. Oh, let me get your spotlight back on. Okay, so a few questions. Well, first I want to say, you know, really just wow. Brad, thank you for sharing your personal stories. You know, obviously we work together and I've heard him before, but every time, you know, you just bring that emotion back into it. Because sadly, I think most of us have a personal connection to a horrible event. And with, to me, hopefully with things that you have shared with us today, we can all do our part in overcoming these tragedies, because that shouldn't be the norm. And so again, thank you so much. So we're going to start a little poll here, see if you were paying attention to what Brad was telling us today and why we start that poll. I'm going to go ahead and shoot a few of the questions that I've gotten through some direct chat. So how do you ensure that employees have the necessary knowledge to be safe at work? Oop, you might just have to minimize that poll. Can you hear me, Brad?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay.
I'm
Great.
sorry. I got the poll coming up and I was looking at the poll.
Yeah, so again, how do you ensure employees have the necessary knowledge to be safe at work? Now, how do you get that across?
It starts with training, and there's a right way to do training and there's a wrong way to do training. The wrong way to do training is to sit an employee in front of a computer and say, watch this, and then sign the training roster. or read this and then sign the training roster. We've developed a course in Central Valley Ag, we call it Foundations for Safety Leadership, where we take our managers through train the trainer sessions. We teach them the right way to do training. We've got to figure out how to dispel the myth of it will never happen to me as part of our training. It's not just knowledge about what the hazards are, it's got to be part of it to dispel that misconception. How do we do that? I've got a formula that I teach, and the formula is 80-20. 80% of any training session is talking about why the rule exists. Do that by sharing stories. 20% of your training content for any safety rule needs to be about what the rule is and how to follow it. Spend the biggest majority of your time talking about why and helping change their heart as to why it's important.
You know, that is so impactful to me, that one statement right there. You got to change somebody's heart. You know, Carol Jones yesterday said something about, hey, if you see something, say something. That's it. We can't just say this is normal, so let's ignore it. So how do you ensure effective coaching? You mentioned it's important for you to be a coach. You know, how do you do that across a large company? You mentioned you're in 3 states.
Mm-hmm. I'm a firm believer that you need to measure something to improve on it. And what do we measure? We measure the king, the queen, the jack, and the joker to make sure they're being removed from the deck. We do that through an audit process. Not unlike OSHA, when we show up to a facility to do an audit, we take employees, we interview them to make sure they have the right knowledge. That's the most important one right there, is make sure they understand the rules. We look through their facilities, make sure that we've got the queens out of the deck. They don't have unsafe facilities. Mm-hmm. We look at their written programs, make sure that their programs are being followed properly. And then we make sure that we don't have pencil whipping or other indications that we've still got jokers in the deck, right?
Yeah. You know, in that very last slide, you showed obviously employees. I saw, you know, jeans and leather boots. So that wasn't you out there. So how do you get people, other employees, your boots on the ground people involved in the safety outreach in schools and communities? Because again, at the beginning, you also mentioned being active in communities.
That didn't come from me, and that did not come from my safety team. That was a result of employee buy-in. When the employees started seeing the safety news alerts come out and some of the training that we provided, they realized how important it was, and they thought that we were failing our communities by not sharing that through our schools and through our farm communities. They took it upon themselves to develop that training. I was not involved in that. They took that ownership.
Well, that, you know, that says to me, there's really a building of the ownership and that safety culture. When the boots on the ground people say, I've got an idea. I know you have a lot of MacGyvers out there building these safety pieces of equipment. You know, I don't know how well you feel you can answer to this, but I'm going to ask it. Just saw in the chat. How do you do training when working for a swine company where biosecurity is paramount? You know, we start to have a little bit of biosecurity because we do have now organic and non-GMO facilities, so food grade. So, you know, we're starting that, but how do you think you go about that training in these situations?
Well, I think you still follow the 80-20 rule on that, Barb.
Okay.
People will follow rules if they understand why the rule is important. Why is it critical? So spend 80% of your conversation about what is biosecurity, what are the risks if we don't follow biosecurity protocols, and 20% of your training on what those rules are. And there's nothing more powerful than sharing true stories. Now, you don't have to go too far on the internet to find where biosecurity issues has caused infection in poultry or hog barns. right? So
Mhm.
you got major loss of livestock, and it's just so important. And so I guess that's my recommendation.
Okay. No, again, I like that. Go back to that 80-20. Gotta keep everybody involved. What training programs do you use to help location managers be better safety leaders?
Well, like I say, we have a training program that we implemented in-house. We call it Foundations for Safety Leadership. And essentially, it's just training where I sit them down and I say, here's what safety looks like. Your location manager, what happens if you walk past somebody not wearing a seatbelt on a forklift? Well, you've just changed the rule. Now it's acceptable to not wear a seatbelt at your location. Supervisors need to hear that message. And the same is true of frontline employees. What are they doing to hold each other accountable? We talk about that circle a lot at the training. How do we make sure everybody has 2 feet inside that circle at all times? Well, if you're willing to let your buddy climb up on the last rung of the ladder and stand there, right, and not say something or take action to stop that, well, you don't have 2 feet in the circle, right?
Right.
Now,
Yeah.
it's not always easy to be the person who intervenes when they see something unsafe, but part of our training with our supervisors and with our leaders when we do that training is making sure that they get uncomfortable and they're willing to get uncomfortable and keep their feet inside that circle.
Excellent. Excellent. I'm just gonna do one more question here as we've kind of met time. But you showed a lot of information and shared stories about being involved and called upon by local fire and rescue. How hard was it in starting out with this to get buy-in or to I'll say get that comfort level from local fire and rescue to say, hey, we need you involved.
We did not plan to cooperate with fire departments. That was never our mission. Our mission was to create rescue teams for internal use at Central Valley Ag.
Okay.
But they saw us training, and they saw that we were a resource that they could utilize. And they realized that they didn't necessarily have the ability, most of them volunteer fire departments, to do the level of training that we did for High Angle. And so we quickly built relationships with them, and they reached out to us, Barb. We didn't reach out to them. They reached out to us and said, hey, if we ever get in a pinch, can we call you? And the answer was absolutely.
I think that's so very important. Anymore, all our businesses are looking at the risk assessment. How, hey man, assessing that risk. If you go on site with your team to somebody else's facility and something happens, that, oh, could you be held responsible? Well, I feel obviously you've taken that, the thought of it's not about our risk, it's about what we can do for others. Again, just being part of communities. I think that's so very important.
Barb, we had 2 rescues that were individuals buried up to their neck that our team was able to go out and take out of that grain bin. That wife that met that guy as he came out of that grain bin would tell you, and they don't care about the liability piece. They just say thank you.
Right. Right. No, I think that's so very important. Again, our theme this year for Stand Up for Grain Safety, maybe it seems a little corny, but it's about we all have a piece in this. And there are also so many pieces to that safety puzzle. Look at all the different things you shared today. It isn't just, the safety director saying, okay, I said, do this. That's not the aspect that you're coming at, that there are a lot of different pieces to it for us to be safe. So thank you very much for sharing that for everybody. Appreciate that. A lot of phenomenal comments out there, again, on what you shared today. So thank you. We have reached that time. Again, I want to say thank you for everybody for being engaged. and all your chat and your comments, for Brad for sharing today. If you saw in the chat, you may have to scroll back through here quick, but you can get a certificate for today. Just hit the little downward arrow on that certificate, and you can download that to your desktop for today. For an overall Stand Up for Grain Safety, go to standupforgrainsafety.org and let us know about your participation. And with that, I will say thank you for attending. And if you haven't signed up or registered for the other safety trainings this week, please do so. We have, well, just a minute, let me get to that schedule. We have safety culture today, strain sprains on Wednesday, focusing a lot on hand safety. And we have a bonus Spanish language session Wednesday afternoon on that topic. Thursday morning, we have ladder safety. And Thursday afternoon, again, another bonus Spanish language session. And then Friday, heat stress and temperature extremes with, again, another Spanish session after lunch. So make sure to join us the rest of the week and have a wonderful day. I saw Scott, where do you get the certificate? If Catherine, if you could post today's certificate, pop that back in the chat box there at the bottom. As you scroll through, there's a couple of different times. June, the recording of this, every session is being recorded, and that recording will be posted on YouTube under the Stand Up for Grain Safety channel, and it will also be posted after the event on our website. Might give us a day or two to just, again, we go through everything and maybe cut off some of this end chit chat that we're doing. There is that. Thank you. There's a certificate. Thank you, Catherine. All right. Any last minute questions for Brad? Otherwise, have a great day, everybody. I did see, yes, Cody Tamling, thank you for the reminder. Checking out the movie Silo. Yes, it is a dramatization, but very real. A very real depiction of just those things that can happen out there on the farm. So it's not just about our commercial facilities, but also on farm, where we see these incidents and the majority of these incidents. You know what? Hopefully everybody here can take what you're learning and go to your producers, talk to your producers every day, say, you know what, this doesn't have to be the norm. Don't take those chances. You know, if you're out there by yourself and you think your bin clogs up, stop, call somebody. Don't go in there yourself. All right. Thank you. And with that,
can you have Brad address the question from Ian? Are you utilizing your rescue team for confined space entries as well? If so, are you mobilizing before entry or utilizing on a standby basis?
That's a very good question. So it really depends on the situation. If it's a bin entry that doesn't have a risk of engulfment at all, for example, just sweeping the corners of a grain bin or something like that, really wouldn't make sense to have those rescue resources put together for something like that. But we do have situations where we have hung up grain that needs to be swept down off of walls and things like that. And in those situations, yes, we have utilized our rope rescue teams to be on site In many cases, they are helping to lower the workers down inside the silos from the top so that they can work above the grain hazard and not put themselves in danger. So yes, we have utilized our rope rescue, high angle rescue teams for various jobs where we saw that there was a hazard that needed to be addressed.
All right, thank you.
Great, thanks. Thank you, Brad. We'll give you guys one more minute to either post your questions in chat if you have any. You can also unmute yourself at this time if you want to say something directly to Brad. We'll stay on for one more minute to let you have the opportunity to start doing that.
Hi, Brad. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, go ahead.
Hi. Yeah. So my name is Stacy Sebald. I had Stand Up for Grain had shared my video of my late son, Mitchell McDaniel, who was killed on November 11th, 2019. And I would love to have a private conversation with you sometimes, Brad, because there's a lot that I'm working on. And I, along with another lady who is on here, her name is Tammy Anderson. She's also lost her husband in a grain silo incident a couple of months before my son, but we are both USMWF board members, and we are huge advocates for safety in the workplace. And we're family members and board members. But I would like, there's a lot that I'm working on, and I've been trying to not only get my son's story out there more, but I've, looking towards down the road, I would love to start working more in the field of safety myself, because, for me, it goes now beyond the scope of, it's about turning, my son's loss into something that serves a greater and grander purpose, and to make sure that no family has to ever go through this again. And, you're right. It's the people that have been through it who understand first and foremost the devastation that it leaves behind and how much it changes the dynamics of your entire life. So your presentation today on the stacking the deck for safety was fantastic. That was the best presentation and speech I have ever seen. So I want to thank you so much for that. It was amazing.
So what I might suggest to you is go into the chat and direct message Brad real quick.
Yeah, I screenshotted quickly his email and his phone number. Okay. So I do have his contact information.
Okay. Excellent. Thank you. I think that way you guys can talk directly. And
yeah.
Thank you again for sharing with us. I mean, those again are things, tragedies that we're trying to work on. We're trying to keep these things from happening. Catherine Rylett with Grain Handling Safety Council. That is why Grain Handling Safety Council exists. Catherine's nephew was killed in a grain bin along with a couple other youths, and
Correct.
Her dedication and in saying, I want to do something about this. So
and unfortunately, and not to interrupt you, but I'm telling you from a standpoint of a mother who's been through another family members, and we have got a lot. If you look at our website, the problem is you have a lot of family members. Awareness is key, and everyone will keep telling you that. But the problem is a lot of families, it's too hard for them to share. It is painful to keep reliving that story over and over again. So, and Brad, having not come across that, you have no much idea of how much respect I have for you guys, especially you, Brad, for what you've done and turned it into now, taking what you've seen with the young gentleman who you were referring to, Zane, who's also on our website in our tributes page. What that's like. You guys have to live with that for the rest of your day, just like the OSHA guys, the OSHA inspectors. And I have got nothing but the utmost respect for those guys and what they do, because their job's not easy neither. And you guys don't get the credit that you deserve neither for all the stuff that you're doing with training and safety. So again, from the bottom of my heart, thank you for making workplace safety, for making the workplace a safer place for what you do. It means the world to people like me and our other family members who've lost loved ones.
Well, thank you for sharing your story, and I will tell you, your story is going to have more impact than you would know. We, the individual who got killed in Tamora, Nebraska, where the cross is erected outside the Bend, Troy Childers. It was 20 years ago this November that he had his accident. We invited his mom to come talk to our employee group. We did a company-wide Zoom, and I tell you what, there was some emotion stirred that day, but safety gets real when a mother's telling you to be safe.
Yeah. Well, and like I said, my heart aches, and I wish, that's why there's some of us who have made the choice now to make this, I don't know if you want to call it a lifelong mission or passion, but, it's funny. I did healthcare for 15 years, and now after losing my son, I'm on a completely different mission. And it says, God has a very special way of, turning your life around into, there's just a lot of stuff I'd love to have a conversation with you with sometime, Brad, because if there's anything I can do to help this too, so another family never has to endure this, I'm more than willing to do whatever it takes.
Absolutely.
It is very difficult, Stacy. I've been doing this over 13 years, going on 14 now. Brad, we did have one more question from
Yeah,
Derek.
that was from Derek. And I did ask Derek to go ahead. I shared Brad's information. I think for starting a rope rescue team, we might not have quite the time here to go through it, unless, Brad, there's something simple and quick. Otherwise, I did share your email with Derek so that maybe you can talk a little more in depth.
Yeah.
Because it probably wasn't a quick thing.
It wasn't quick. It wasn't cheap. We did hire an outfit. I think they've trained multiple grain companies across the U.S., but it's SATRA is who we used. SATRA is their abbreviation, and they do professional grain rescue team development. So.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. All right. One last thought here for Brad. Otherwise, I do appreciate this last discussion. Very important. Very important. And thank you again, Brad, for sharing. And we hope to see everybody again tomorrow.
Hey, Barb.
Yes. Who is this?
This is Tom Chohan, and I was just wondering, is there a way I can get an attendance sheet for yesterday's session?
Yes. Tom, can you quickly direct message? Actually, I think Catherine would have your email, but direct message me right now.
Okay.
And that way I'll have your email and we can get that to you.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any more questions for Brad?
No, congratulations and good job to everybody that helped put this together. It was a great learning experience and reminder.
Excellent. Thank you. Tom, I don't see. So, all right. With that, everybody, we're going to go ahead and say goodbye for the day. Thank you so much. And appreciate you all. Thank you.